The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We will talk about the 3D object creation for Pandoras Box. This is the part number 2 for Blender. Martina will help me answering your questions. Hello, Martina.
Hello, everybody.
You can ask your questions in the chat field and we will answer it. Okay, so let's start with our webinar overview. Sorry. So we will talk about the Blender today, the Blender interface, and the coordinate system in Blender, how to set the unit system, and how to edit and transform 3D objects, how to do the UV mapping in Blender, and we will also import the 3D object, which Martina has done already in 3D SMAX in the webinar, and we will import it in the Blender and try to edit it. We will also import the object we have done. We will create in Blender to the Warper and Pandoras Box to see the differences. There is a behavior difference between Blender and Pandoras Box regarding the pivot point. Afterwards, at the end, we will talk about the UV map effects in Pandoras Box. Okay, so let's begin with our Blender interface. So at the beginning, you will get a pop-up window if you open the Blender. I'm working with the Blender version 2.8.2. And we will start a general file. You can see here in the room, you will see the grid. You will see the camera and the light, and also a playback timeline where you can create your playback if you want to render something. But we don't need them. So for Pandoras Box, it's not needed to have a camera view in Blender or a light. It's only for you or for Blender rendering if you want to render PNGs or image sequences. So what we also can do is everything what we have here in this word, we can see it also here, the camera, cube, and the light. And we can select them also via this tab. If you select them, you will see also the properties here. So it will just jump to the object properties and where you can change the location for X, Y, Z, and also the rotation and so on. And there is a delta transform where you can change the pivot points. Okay, so let's just remove what we don't need, like the light and the camera. Okay, now we have only the cube. Actually, you can see here if we rotate this word, you can see the lines, the green line and the red line, and there is also a blue line, like you can see it here in the cycle. Red is for X, green for Y, and Z is blue. To change the grid side and to let the Z-axis also be displayed, we can open up this viewport overlays and select the Z-axis to be also shown in our word. And we can change the scale of our grid. 1 is good. Per default it's on 2, but I have to change it. So it took my change to 1. If you're working, if you are working with meters or centimeters, or depending on what you want to create, if you want to create a watch, then you probably need to work with millimeters. You can change this units under scene properties. This is here on this tab, and there you can see the units. The unit system is metric, and we have the length in meters. So we will work in meters for our 3D object because it's nothing detailed. So I would let it in meters, but you can change this to kilometers, centimeters, millimeters, and micrometers, sorry. Okay, let's just keep this meters and go through the tool options. So here we have a mode. It's already selected under object mode. There are also a lot of other modes, but we will do for this webinar only talk about the object mode and edit mode, because they can create objects and edit them. That's what we need, at least for Pandoras Box. You can here have a select box. So you're in the select button, you can select the cube, but not move it. The other tools are also here for scale, rotate, move, and so on. And there is also a transform tool where you have all of these options. So if you just want to move this cube to somewhere else, you can click on the red line or the red arrow and move this only in X. If you want to rotate it, you just rotate it in Y. You can just use the cycle. And for scale, it's the point. You can click and scale it only in Z. All of these options, you have it also here under transform, under object properties. So let's delete this cube. I can delete everything with the X key and add a new object. So if you click on add here on this tabs, you can add a simple plane, cube, cycle, whatever you need for your object. I just create another cube. Simply, you will see there is an add cube tab here over there, and it's just giving me the size of my, set my size of my 3D object. So I want to have it in 1 meter. So to fill only 1 grid rectangle. And I rotate it, just go back to our select mode. So you see, if I move this cube to 0.5, oops, I want to have it on 1 corner. So it will be, it has to be moved also in Y, 0.5, and in Z. So it will sit on the complete grid here, and it will sit on my 0 point at 1 corner. if you want to move the 3D objects from a special axis, then you can click on these three and see it from only the chosen axis. So I just clicked on X and you will see it from the X axis. If you want to move something only to Z and Y, that's much more easier to work with it. By holding the mouse wheel, you will rotate the word. Okay, let's go to our edit mode. There you can see the vertices now. So the red, the orange points on each corner. This is why the vertex selected mode is already chosen here. If you click the edge selected, then you will see, if I select only one edge, will be only one of these edges. If you want to move something like moving only this edge to somewhere else, and it's easier to work in this mode. If you want only to work or edit a face, then you have to choose the face selected. So let's move this. Okay, so we have now shape. It's not a cube anymore. Of course, you can add multiple objects here and work with them and merge them together and so on to create your final 3D object. Okay, if you want to remove a face or a vertex, then you again click on X and you will get the possibility to remove the vertices you have selected or the edges or only the faces. So I just remove the face, so you will see there is a hole we have here. There's a room, we can go inside and create other stuff. So it's very helpful if you want to create a stage or something like this to have a room and you want to remove different faces there. Okay. Let's go again back to this object mode and delete the object here. You have also here the cursor, so if you move the cursor somewhere else, it'll be the next object you create will be in this location. That's all about the editing and object mode. Is there any questions, Martina, about this?
No, not so far. I think you can go on.
Okay. Good. Let's create a 3D object now. From the x-axis, we will add a cycle there. The radius is 1 meter, and it has 32 vertices. So we can change it here on this tab. And there is a generated UV. You can also uncheck it if you want. And then you have to generate your own UV map for it. Okay, so if we watch it from a little bit upper side and go to the edit mode, you will see all the vertices we have. So we go back again to our x-axis and press the E for for creating another series of the same kind of vertices in the direction we choose with the mouse. So I want just to have something like a glass. So can also scale them down by pressing the S key. And again, pressing E. You can also change everything you want here on this on these tabs. They will be appearing if you change if you press the E or S key, so the shortcuts to be more accurate. Okay. Maybe something like this. Until we will get a glass, wine glass or something like that. So it's not that accurate what I'm doing here. Just a quick creation of 3D objects. But it will just look like a wine glass at the end. Of course, you can edit all of these vertices and make it perfect. What I wanted to show is you will get these vertices, a lot of vertices for a glass or something like this. And it's not really, it's not a smooth edge. So as you can see it here, you can add more vertices and more lines into this to make it perfect, like a cycle, like a half cycle here at the edges. But you have to be careful with this. If they are not necessary vertices you're using for more details, you will get a 3D object with a lot of vertices, and that will not be cool in Pandoras Box, because you wouldn't save performance with this. So I just recommend at this point to not use the vertices you don't need for the details. Just use as much as you have to for the 3D object. Okay.
Pari, just for 1 second,
Yeah.
can you just repeat it for everybody? How did you make it so that you moved only the points in the z-axis? Did you set a constraint, or did it do this automatically because you moved the mouse just up and Blender guessed that you wanted to move them only in z?
I wanted to move them only in Z, but you can also have the shortcut for it to move it only in Z or in X direction. Yeah.
So because you looked from the z-axis and you moved them up, but
Yeah,
why
actually,
didn't it
if you
go to
can't
the
see,
side?
if you
Can you do
can't
it
see
maybe
it
just
here,
once more so
yeah,
that everybody can see it?
yeah. So you see the coordinates there. If I move them to X, it will also turn to X. But if you let it like in this line and press the Z axis, and the Z Z key, then it will be only in Z.
Ah, so
Okay.
whilst you are dragging, you are holding the Z key down.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Good. That was the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Now it's turned to something. I just got to Control C and remove this. Okay. What you can see here, the faces. If I go back to this face selection, and if I want to select something, you will see these faces are actually in a rectangle form. If we export this glass now and import it in Pandoras Box, only, it will be okay. So you can have a 3D object also with quadrant or rectangle faces in Pandoras Box, but you cannot work with this in the Warper. For the Warper, it has to be in triangular faces. That's what you can do if you select all these faces by pressing the A key, all of them, and go to the face tab in the edit mode and clicking on triangular faces or using a Control T for it. Then you will get something like this. It will add another vertices, another vertex, and make this a rectangular face into triangular faces. If I go back again to the vertex selected, so then you can see the vertices there. Now we can create we can export this glass into the Warper and import it into the Warper because it has already triangular faces. There is another option for it. Just make another Control C. And you go to the Faces tab and press Poke Faces. Then you will get this line. So you will get 2 lines and you will separate this rectangular face into 4 parts. That's also possible and that will also work because we will have this single little faces in triangular. So this is also another option, but you will add for this a lot of vertices. So it's not needed to have poke faces for the Warper. If you want to save the performance, use just the triangular option here for the triangular faces. Okay. Sorry. Just wanted to have it gain back to this and use the triangular face. I didn't have a texture for this glass, so I didn't have created something like this. But this is, yeah, we do not use UV mapping, or we do not do the UV mapping blender for the glass because I don't have the texture. But we will create another cube and we will have the dice texture for the cube and then do the UV mapping in Blender. What I wanted to show is how to export this object. If you go to File, Export, we have the option to export it as FBX or as object. We will use FBX for this. There is no option to export it as 3ds Max or another format like this. There are a lot of add-ons under the preferences where you can activate them. I'm not sure if there is another plugin or external plugin for 2ds Max or another format. So this is why I take the FBX. So as you can see, we have here the properties, and the most important part is the transform and the scale number. So one is exactly the same scaling value which we had in this word. So we let it by 1. And another scaling important scaling setting is the apply scalings. If it would be on all local, it wouldn't really match to our units or what we have created here. It should be under, so you should change it to FBX unit scale. That will then match the size you have already created in Blender. And that's very important for Pandoras Box if you are working with marker calibrations in the Warper. Then you have to create object that's matching to the real 3D object, so in the same size. So that's very important for this part. Z minus is forward, and Y should be up, because Y is always in Pandoras Box up. That's already set it. And now we can export it under this. Let's take wine glass number 2. Export. Okay. If you go now to Pandoras Box, just refresh this folder. Now I have got this, and it will add it into the project tab. I don't want to scale it or have it in different levels or change the units. So I let this properties like nothing, none of them. Martina has also explained these stuff, and she also have done this hierarchy levels with the plans. So that's sometimes very helpful to use them, but we don't need it for this 3D object. So I just click on OK. Add it to my layer. Oops. Okay, there is the glass. We have created there. Let's give it a color for a texture for it. The color bars. Okay. So the texture is not really cool here because we have not created how to take this UV coordinates for the glass, but it has UV information at least. So let's go back to the Blender and go back to our object mode and remove this glass and add another cube with the size 1 meter, and that's all good. You place it on one corner And we go back to the UV editing mode. If the 3D object is already selected, you will see the unwrapped 3D object in the editing mode. Of course, you can here do the UV mapping. If you have an added texture, you can choose it from here. If you don't, just click on open and choose. Let's choose this one. Dice texture number 1. So I have created this because I wanted to show you that's not really helpful to have a big texture and then choose the parts we want. So we can have this also, we can also have the half of this texture, but it's now easier to do the UV mapping in Blender. It's not really performant. So if I select one of these vertices, I can move them to the edges, or I can select all of them and then scale them. So that will now match my my texture, but it's not in the real world. We will have a smaller texture, and we have to match each side to this smaller texture or take the parts of this. So let's have a look to the other option. This one. So now we cannot move these vertices anymore. We have to have them separately as a rectangle to be able to move them. So that's why we need the mark seam or mark our seams. But before I do this, I want to show you another option to do the UV mapping in Blender. Under the shading tab here, you will see the 3D object, and you see here the downside free place. So let's create a new material. So you see there is a material, an output node, like you know it probably from the widget designer. And there is also another node for doing ambient lights and so on. And I want to have my texture. So let's go to our Coolux folder. Pandoras Blender. I will take this texture for this dice, and I can just select it and move it and add it as the input node. You can have in between of them a filter node or something, but I don't need this one. I just want to make it as easy as possible. So I just connect this texture to my output material node, and I have to go under this tab into the UV editor and open my texture to be able to see it. Okay. Now we go to edit mode. And we want to see our faces here, so we have to select all of them, and then you will be able to see them. But they are connected to each other, so I want to have them separately. This is why it's a little bit easy for the cube, because if I select all of these faces, I can mark them as seam, and then I will have them separately. But for other complicated 3D objects, you can select edges to mark them as seam. And then, yeah, if you select all of these edges or the edges you want to have separately, and then you can go and mark them as seam. But I want to have all the faces as seams, so again, I select all of these, mark seam, and you see the red lines, they are now separated all. And here I have to go to the project from view. Will create for me a little cube here, and I have to unwrap it again. And there it is. I don't have to do anything there. I don't have to move them or turn them around. But if I change my texture, now I can move them or scale them. Let's go have only this face. I'm now in the vertices selected for the UV map, so I can only move the vertices. If I want to select the whole face, I have to change it to faces. Now I can select it, move it somewhere, and also scale it down, maybe, and move it until I match the yeah, the texture limits I want to have as a cutted one. Any questions to this part, Martina?
No, not so far. The only thing that I just see right now that the 5 is somehow scaled on the dice. Is there somewhere like an update button, or why doesn't it really match?
No, there is no update button. I have to do all the faces for this to match them all. Yeah, but that's somehow, that's actually the wrong side. Let's select all of them. Oops. So to edges, I can move this. could have something to do with that one. Yeah. Okay, let's go back again to this project. Yeah. Unwrap. Okay, I have to do the same on the other texture.
So you have now two textures applied to it, or how? Why are there
No.
two in the background?
You can change your UV mapping here, depending on what texture you have used at the end. So what is the last texture you have used? That will apply automatically the UV mapping for it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have different, it was just an example. If you have different textures, you have to rearrange this. So it could be different forms that you can use, or if you, yeah, that wouldn't match anymore.
So that one face is taking something from picture number 1 and the other faces are taking something from another picture. So you can add textures.
Yeah, that's not possible to have two textures and having different faces. That wouldn't also make sense in Pandoras Box. At the end, you will get a template for your UV mapping, and you have to rearrange the UV mapping like the template, and because at the end you will get the content like this. So this is only, it was an example for it, that we can deliver content like this, where we have to, where we just have to scale up our form, an unwrapped form, and then it will match. Or if we get this texture where we have to rearrange the faces and cut them. That was the only reason I have chosen this example.
Okay.
I didn't want to confuse. Okay. So now let's go back again to this.
Could you just hold on for a second? There's a question whether you know if there's a way to save one total texture from different materials.
From you mean if you change the materials here? You can change them, but yeah, it will be the last material you have chosen for this object. So if I understand this question correctly.
Maybe Antonio can repeat it once so that we know what's. Oh, if you use multiple materials, how can I export only one total texture?
I don't know what you mean. Sorry.
I think if you, if I understand it correctly, you can set up many materials there, and then you want to kind of bake it down. But this is not really part of our workflow. Normally, we just do the UV map stuff and not really work with materials. So maybe if you, search for tutorials on Blender, I think bake is one of the keywords. But yeah, as I said, this is not really what we usually do.
Yeah, that's correct. I haven't done it, Antonia. I don't really know how to set different materials to one texture. Okay, is there any questions about UV mapping?
Nope, not so far.
Okay, we go back again to the layout, and yeah, we have now our rectangular faces. So I didn't change it for the UV mapping. It would make the UV mapping a little bit complicated. So I will do it in the last step to change the faces again to triangular faces. And if we go back again to our shading tab, you will see it will also apply here. So that's a little bit easier to do the UV mapping, at least for me. Okay, actually we are good here now to export our cube. So let's edit cube webinar. So we go back to Pandoras Box. And so now we have it here. And I want to use this texture because it's what I have done in Blender. So it's, see, it's totally matching the UV. What I wanted to show you is when I zoom in and place another texture like geometry, you see the 3D object is sitting in the corner. So it's exactly like the location we have had in Blender. If I change the opacity of the geometry picture, you probably will see also the 3D object sitting in the back. So we can change the position here, or we export it again. To have it oops. It should be -1. Yeah, to have it in front of the geometry picture. So that's what we can do in Pandoras Box, or if we are using, if you want to export it again, you can do it. Let's have a look in the Warper. Oh, before we do it, just wanted to show you the pivot point of this 3D object. So if I rotate it in Y, you will see it will rotate on the 0 point. And the Z is also it will rotate. So the pivot point is our 0 point in the middle of the corner. Now let's import it in the Warper. Just open it under File, Import Object. We don't want to merge the imported 3D object with the current scene, so no. That's a cube webinar. And we don't want to load it in parts. So the FX SDK resize option will give you per default the number, the percentage 100 for resizing. So if you want to keep your size as you have created this 3D, or you have exported this 3D object, then you keep it on 100 and you don't change this number. If the 3D object is created in a wrong percentage, then you can change it here to turn it to 1 or 10 and resize this 3D object. So I don't want to change the size. This is why I keep the 100 and I click on OK. Now we can zoom in. So the 3D object is sitting exactly like in Pandoras Box. The Z-axis is a little bit back. Now, what I want to do is I want to try to rotate this 3D object. When I click on rotate and right click, then I can choose the axis I want to rotate this 3D object. So, and write down the steps I want to use for the rotation. So let's take the y-axis and rotate this 3D object. Sorry, I have to go to object selection and select this 3D object. Go back. Okay. So it's a little bit different than Pandoras Box. The 3D object is rotating now on its own axis, on its own 0 point. It will totally ignore the pivot point we have had in Blender or in Pandoras Box, and it will just take the local 0 point of the 3D object. So this is why it's rotating on its own, around itself. So let's take another axis, XZ. So you see, it has nothing to do with the 0 point we have set it up in Blender anymore. So that's a difference between Pandoras Box and a Warper. Pandoras Box will not ignore the pivot point we have set it up, but the Warper will ignore it and use the own local 0 point of the 3D object. Any questions to this?
Nothing so far, but I just wanted to repeat the point. Pandora does not take the pivot point. It sets it always to 0, 0. So whatever you have set up in your 3D file, it's ignoring this as well. This is just because of the thing, if you have many objects and you want to import them as a venue site, they all rotate around 1 point when you rotate your scene or your layers in that case. That's the reason why. So we just wanted to point out that there are two differences in both programs.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's go minimize this one. Go back again to our Pandoras Box. I would like to show you the Eon effects under UV mapping. You would see a lot of UV mapping effects. Actually, you can change this UV mapping for the texture also in the UV mapping mode. Martina has done it with the 3 planes and the 3ds Max webinar, and we talk about this under in the UV mapping mode webinar. They are both online on our YouTube channel, so you can have a look. This is why I wouldn't talk about this mode anymore. I just wanted to show you the UV mapping shader effects can use to manipulate this UV map. There are lots of effects like tiling. So as you can see also here in the documentation, we'll just tiling your texture in a factor you set. So if I just use this mixes turn up. I'm sorry, it was on the wrong on the wrong layer. Again, on the cube. So you see the texture getting smaller, smaller, smaller. It will just get tiling in the 3D object or also in another 2D texture. Let's remove this one. There is a UV scroll effect. If I mix it, you can set a speed for X. So let's just having it a little bit soon. Okay. Give it a speed and the texture, not the 3D object, but the texture will be rotated in the speed you have set it up. And it will be constantly rotated in X or Y, and can also set a factor for it. However you like. If you have a sphere, for example, and you want to let the map on it just rotate it, then you can use such effects like this, for example. There are also other effects like the zoom, texture zoom, where you can zoom into the texture, you use the position you want to zoom in. Yeah, that's I think if you need such as effects, you can have look into the documentation. They are documented with, and they have also pictures, so you know what they are for. Let's go back again to our Blender. It's a few last things I want to talk about this. Let's move this cube, and I want to import the 3D object Martina has created in the 3ds Max webinar. So we had 3 planes, and here you got them. If you're in the object mode, you can select all of them, and you can scale them up. You can edit them like you have created them in the Blender, so there is no difference between them. It's also possible to go to the edit mode and change the triangular faces to poke. So if I select all of them, can go back. Oh my God, what's happened? To faces, and if I click now on poke faces, it will just create a poke and 4 faces for a triangular face. So that's not what I wanted. So it will look like this. There are too much vertices there. So Control Z. We can have a workaround for it to trace it to quads first and then go back to poke, or using the triangular face. That was triangular. Yeah, you can also work with the vertices and move them, edit them like you want. You can also edit the UV editing for this texture. So if I choose here another color bar, let's go to the shading. I like the shading more than So I can remove this one and choose the color bar here. So we go now to edit mode and change it out here in the editor. I can select all of them, go back to edit mode, and you see the UV mapping for all of the chosen faces. And you can change it like we have done it in for the cube. So you can separate them if you want, or you can just use them here and move them. Yeah, that's like, yeah, that's the same like a 3D object creating in the Blender. So if you're using the FBX format, it's very easy to do these changes. Okay, is there any questions?
No, I think you're explaining it so well. Everybody's understanding.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I think I have explained everything what I had on my list. If there are no questions, then say goodbye for today. Are there some incoming questions?
No,
Okay.
nothing so far.
So then have a good day. And we will see each other in another webinar.
Yep.
Thank you, Martina.
Well, thank you, Perry. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.